and this share thing is in the way. Oops, it's popping up in the way of, okay, cool. So thanks everybody for coming and allowing me to speak. I guess speaking with Vita, my name is Daniel Nguyen. I'll be presenting on buying real estates. Both Vita asked me to present on potentially buying a first home. I decided to kind of split it between a first home and once you start to invest in real estate, buying your first investment as well. And I'm just going to kind of breeze through a lot of these because in my experience, there's going to be a lot more questions. So I wanted to allow more time for questions, less for basically regurgitating stuff that's basically my rudimentary PowerPoint skills. So I'll just go ahead and dive right in. About me, I was Indiana University Alpha Pi chapter, class of fall '06. Graduated in finance and entrepreneurship, minor in psychology. GPA was not very good. I come to see that as a blessing in a huge blessing in disguise for me at this point. It was in December 2008 that I graduated, so I guess it didn't matter because most of my friends couldn't get jobs anyway, due to the financial crash. I finally did get into finance and accounting, and I hated it. So I worked there for about a year, and I decided to try other things, recruiting for finance positions, and then I got into real estate genre positions such as mortgage, and then I moved on to flipping, real estate, pretty much the full kind of ADHD of trying new things in real estate. And then I saved money and bought rental properties concurrently. So
Hey,
that's
David.
how I kind of um, got into real estate investing.
Hey, David. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I don't want to miss anything that you have. I think if everybody's like me, I'm seeing PowerPoint, not the screen. And so when you advanced your slides, we didn't
Oh,
we didn't advance.
oh, it didn't advance.
You
Okay,
might have to just share a different
okay,
screen.
okay.
Sorry to interrupt.
Screen sharing. I'll do. Is this edit? Um, oh shoot, I don't know. I'm not sure how I go back. I'll stop sharing for now, and then I'll share screen. There we go. Share. You are screen sharing. Okay, cool. Slideshow. Thank you for letting me know. That would be a very important detail. Okay. Um, so this is the slide I was just on. Pretty much everything I talked about. So I'll kind of go on and skip this one. My portfolio, mostly just to show that I am kind of qualified to talk about this sort of. Um, just over the years accumulating stuff with partners and when I actually just sold a 28 unit building that I owned by myself, and I went into the 30 unit mobile home park near Mount Shasta with a few partners, and then currently going to Southern California next week to look at two more mobile home parks, to start to build this portfolio. So the hotels are mostly in the Midwest, partnered up on people with those. And so I'll jump right into keys to buying your first home. Some of these are pretty self-explanatory as well. Location, close to, whatever. When you first start buying your first home, location is number one. It's always location, location, location. You can always remodel a house. You can't move it to a different place. Best thing to do is buy the worst house that you can renovate in the best area, or whatever areas is your priority, whether it be closer to parents, siblings, family, a job or relocation for a job, and then or desired recreation. For example, you wouldn't move to Manhattan if you are obsessed with mountain biking. So first thing to think about location, that's pretty self-explanatory. Talk to an agent, an expert that can guide you through the process. I know there's a lot of going on with the National Association of Realtors. and people saying that buyers don't need agents to buy a house. I personally think as of right now, they do, because of such a recent transition. There's going to be a need for knowledge, and you'll see kind of, I'll touch on that in the later slides. Talk to a mortgage loan officer to see what you can qualify for. A lot of times in really competitive environments, especially here in the Bay Area, um, a listing agent won't even look at your package unless you have a pre-approval letter built in or submitted with the offer, because they're looking at 15, 20 offers on homes. And if I've seen other places where I've submitted offers that didn't require that, because the property's been on the market for 3 months and you're the only offer, so you can take your time doing things. Identifying a home with an agent, they have access to the multiple listing service, the service that agents list these properties on, or you can do it on by yourself online via Zillow, Redfin, and there's other websites too. You can browse houses that are for sale. Disclosures, basically documents on the home, which the agent will guide you through. And as of right now, I still believe that an agent is important for the buying process, because since it's so new, that lawsuit with National Association of Realtors, they don't have a lot of education for home buyers out there yet to teach about what you're looking at when you're looking at disclosures. And they're very, very important for knowing what you're getting into for a home. When you write an offer, use comparables, like properties close by to see what the price is, and then you both that to determine the offer price, and after you figure out what your budget is based on your qualification for a mortgage, and then you close and you get the keys and you post the pictures on social media. Everybody likes it. Moving on, so going to mortgage. This is just going to gloss over everything because there's a lot to cover in 50 minutes. So you can reach out to me or ask questions at the end if you have any questions. So when you qualify for a mortgage, all of your revolving debt, student loans, car loans. So that's why a lot of people suggest paying off your car before you go and buy a house, because back when interest rates were like 4.5, I think a $400 car payment was $75,000 in buying power in terms of house qualification. So if you can afford a $500,000 house, by paying off your car, now you can move that up to 575 because it's all based on gross monthly income. And so every monthly obligation decreases your ability to qualify for a certain mortgage, and that's how it works. You see what kind of mortgage you can qualify for. You take the down payment, which is actually just called funds to close. So when you buy a house, loan gets wired to escrow, and then you're just responsible for bridging that gap between purchase price and the loan, which people call a down payment. But really, it's just what you have to bring to the table to actually get recorded for your house. List of documents you need for a mortgage loan officer, and this is just the basic loan. If you work a W-2, it gets a lot more complicated with much more creative financing. If you decide, if you're self-employed or you're buying a rental property or something like that. So basically, you can read it here. It's just the rule of twos, essentially. So 2 years of taxes, 2 years of or 2 months of asset statements, and I guess I forgot to put it down because I breezed through writing this, but also 2 months or 1 full month, 2 paychecks, 2 paycheck stubs. So that's what's required. Disclosures. So disclosures are very, very important. A lot of them are generic. It's just generic forms. You have to acknowledge reading, such as wire fraud disclaimers, how to protect yourself against wire fraud, because we're going to be wiring a big amount of money to escrow, lead paint warnings, asbestos, different things from just kind of saying if your house that you're buying is built within these years, be careful of this. If you're these years, be careful of lead paint. Kind of like the warning labels on I don't know, a Superman costume telling you you're not going to be able to fly. Um, Seller disclosures is a little bit more important. It basically says, seller, please tell the buyer everything you know as a non-expert that doesn't know about, behind the drywall, stuff like that. Anything that's readily apparent to a non-expert, you have to disclose. Repairs, anything with or without permit, or whether they're not with permits or without permits. Is there a regular disturbance in the neighborhood that you notice? Any remodels that you did, kind of within the past whatever, has anybody passed away in the house within the past few years? Because that's a lot of religious issues come up with that. So seller disclosures is very important to tell you about what you're getting into. Inspections is another important part of buying a house. Sellers will usually have, of course, depending on the competition. So sellers will have an inspection done. You could get your own second opinion if most inspectors are kind of board certified. So usually they're very impartial, but a lot of people like to just for their own comfort get their own inspectors just so they know that there's no conflict of interest. A lot of times that's not possible because a lot of people are even going into houses now here in the Bay Area because they're competing with 15, 20 other people and going 200,000 above asking price sometimes, that it's not always possible to have those kind of things, have an exception for those kind of things. But when you do the inspections, they will come out with a whole list of every little thing that an inspector notices about the house. Some of them are going to be very, very minor, like dust in the furnace, for example. You might, like they say, you might want to clean that out, stuff like that. Dryer vents, they can see this and that. But the most important things are section 1 or section 2 items. A lot of times lenders won't close until section 1 stuff is done, such as if the house has to be tented and fumigated, you have to do that before moving in. Tripping hazards on the sidewalk or the porch, general things that can cause injury, or kind of structural to the building will have to be repaired before the buyer moves in. And then other things such as maintenance items, they'll list, but you don't necessarily have to do them right away. You can just be known that they should be taken care of at some point. So making your offer, assessing comparables, which the second bullet point will tell you what a comparable is. So if you go on to Redfin or Zillow, you can go to the filters and you can filter by if you're looking to buy a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom house, you can filter it 3-bedroom, 2-bath, put the range of the square foot that your house is. So if it's like 2,500 square foot, you can search 2,200 to 2,800 square feet that have sold within the past 6 months within 0.5, half a mile of the property you're looking at. And it'll basically just tell you what value of the house you're looking at is, and it's basically going to follow the houses that have sold. Houses that are pending do not count. Houses that are listed do not count, because unless they actually sold at that price, then you can never use that to determine, because they could fall out of escrow, buyers can cancel, anything like that. And if you can't find anything, if it's a kind of a rural area, then you slowly move farther out and farther back in terms of time. Just know that it's not as accurate to use that as a basis of comparison. So general rule of thumb is you can usually offer within, because real estate goes up as time goes by, in the general sense, you can usually use one of the higher comparables prices to make your offer and base your offer on that price. Um, this is breezing through this pretty fast. Okay, cool. It seems like we're just about on time. So investment real estate buying gets a little bit more complicated without as much protection because the boards usually assume that if you're buying an investment, you already own a house and you probably it might not probably isn't your first time buying an investment, so they don't protect you as much. Um, the on this the purchase contract or the listing contract for a house, if you sell your own house, you're required to disclose whether or not you put the property on the multiple listing service because they want to protect the seller from having the agent not marketed as much and not securing the best price possible for the seller, kind of fulfilling their fiduciary duty to the seller. And with commercial real estate, there's no protection like that because everybody's considered a sophisticated buyer. So if you're buying a single family house, duplex, fourplex, a duplex, three, triplex, fourplex, basically 2, 3, and 4 unit properties, they're all considered residential. And the process is pretty much the same as a single family house. So I'm just going to talk about the mostly the differences and talk about more the commercial side of things, 5 units and up, along with anything other than those 4 genres. Strip malls, hotels, everything is everything else is considered commercial property. Storage units, commercial like warehouses. So the difference is there's more off-market properties through agents and brokers. So if you're going to buy an investment property, you really have to spend time networking with agents and brokers because a lot of times an agent will establish a group of buyers they know will close on properties. And so they don't need to, for example, if a real estate agent or like a broker or an agent has a list of 20 investors they know will happily buy anything they have, they don't need to go out and market. And it's very hard if you email a broker saying, hey, I'm an investor, can you add me to your list? A lot of times they won't care to do that because they don't need to if they have all the buyers that they need to facilitate their business. So building those relationships is very, very important. You can find a lot more on your own through loopnet.com, Crexy, those are both, and some others. They're both kind of it's kind of Zillow and Redfin and whatnot for commercial properties. The best properties are going to be through off market, so that they're not being bid on by the general public. The mortgage is different. The offer and buying process is a little bit more complicated, and I'll go over those through the next slides. This is probably the number one reason. The number 1 and 2 reasons are coming up of why I like commercial property for investments better. And a lot of people won't approach this problem until they get investing process. But if you get residential property, 1, 2, 3, 4 units, residential mortgage banks will only will allow a maximum of 10 properties because they go on your debt to income ratio, meaning the 43%. So basically, you get if you have enough income to offset the mortgage of a 4 unit property, then it won't affect your debt to income ratio. But if you're paying a little bit more on the mortgage than you are in the income, it decreases your buying power, which is generally the case here in the Bay Area. And there's not much that cash flow is positive. Everybody's banking on appreciation, but something to think about. In other parts of the country, not an issue, but you do have that 10 property limit. So with commercial, it goes by the income that the property generates because nobody cares about buying an apartment building. Nobody cares about buying a hotel or a warehouse. People are buying the passive income from it to better their lives. And so the banks determine everything by the same. So it's they go by what's called the DSCR, which is the debt service coverage ratio. It essentially is the net operating income, which is very important, for other calculations as well. Debt service is basically just the mortgage payment, which is the principal plus interest put together. So the DSCR that most mortgage companies require are usually roughly around 1.2, which means that the net operating income has to be 120 or 20% more than the mortgage and interest. So you have that positive cash flow, and that's what the bank is looking for. They'll still collect all your personal information, but this one they mostly they don't judge it by your personal income. They judge it by the income that the property produces. And this is what I love about commercial real estate. Probably the number one thing is how the value of commercial real estate is determined, which is the capitalization rate. Short, they call it for cap rate. They'll say a 3 cap, 4 cap, 5 cap, 6 cap, 7 cap, whatever it is. And those cap rates are determined by where the property is located and the class of property. A being, let's say, a penthouse in New York City or a premium apartment. B is a little bit lower. C and D is considered kind of low income, Section 8, that kind of thing. So a big apartment complex in New York City could be a 3 cap, which basically means the net operating income is 3% of the value of the property. So people are willing to pay more for the property for a smaller amount of income because it's in a more desirable area. And so you take this. This is how you create value. When you have a commercial property, any decrease in expense will increase the value of the property, and any increase in revenue will will increase the value of the property. You don't have to wait for comparable. You don't have to wait for the entire market to go up. So you can create and make value in your building. Even when the market is being flat, and that's what I really like about commercial real estate. The offer process. So what happens is you check out a deal, a building, you like what you see, you like the overall price, you want to start negotiating with the seller. So basically, you show your interest and your commitment by writing a letter of intent. And on the letter of intent, you basically let the seller know, okay, this is the loan I have, the pre-approval I have. This is how long I want to go over everything about the property. And then once this due diligence period is over, I'll give you a deposit, and the deposit is non-refundable once I do all my due diligence, and then we start the actual closing process. And then you say, I want you to give me 3 months, 3 years of financials, repairs, this and that, everything you need for the due diligence period. And then you say, okay, once this is over, I will need 45 days or whatever it is to close on the property. So once you have the LOI signed, it's usually non-binding. It's just kind of to show that you have kind of good faith in your negotiations, and you're not wasting the seller's time. At this point, once the LOI is signed, you can order your inspections, and usually the buyer is responsible again because there's no protections for the buyer. There's less protections, sorry, for the buyer being a sophisticated buyer. And then usually, as an example, my buyer for my 28 unit building that I sold a couple weeks ago, he unfortunate for me, he got a inspection, and it turns out that there's 3 buildings. 2 of them had roofs that need to be done, and so he renegotiated. I actually ended up having to credit him $85,000 for the 2 roofs. It is what it is. That's just kind of nature of being an investor. And so the renegotiation happened for repairs that are needed. And usually I would just opt for the buyer to get the credit for money instead of me fixing it, because then I'd be on the hook if something goes wrong after it just gets more complicated if I was responsible for the repairs and something went wrong after he took possession. offer part number two is after all that is done, you can or actually I jumped ahead a little bit. Sorry. After all, you agree to all the terms. You do the purchase and sales agreement is basically the official document, the binding document that is the letter of intent. And that, I'm sorry, I jumped a little the order that comes before you put the LOI into official terms before that whole inspection and renegotiation. Sorry if that caused any confusion, that's my fault. And so yeah, so that basically is written out by either the agent on a template or an attorney can do it if it's going to be usually you bring in attorneys if it's going to be a bigger sale in the I mean I've seen people use it for as little as 5 million and then it goes up from there 30 40 50 million 100 million whatever it is. It's usually good to bring attorneys in. And then during the close period, which is after the deposit goes hard, goes non-refundable. After all the buyer does all the due diligence, like walking the units, getting inspection, the seller can then perform the negotiated repairs. In my case, there was like a door that has to be replaced, some cracks in the sidewalk, some glass that was broken, and then some trash in the back that they wanted to be cleaned up. So I did that during the close period. And then once it's recorded with the county, it closes and you pass the keys along. And then the buyer has a new investment. I breezed through this pretty fast because it's kind of a macro view of just the buying. There's obviously a lot more, but I wanted to there's usually a lot of questions, so I wanted to spend as much time, and obviously I can just send these slides to anybody, and you can read them. They're pretty straightforward. So at this point, I'll take any questions that you might have. If anybody has any questions, let's see. I'm trying to forward. I don't know how we want to do this. If people just want to chime in to ask anything, then please go ahead. Or if you want me to kind of blab about anything else.
Daniel, do you want to maybe shut the
Screen?
unshare your screen? That way if anyone's like raising their hand or something, like you can just
Okay.
see them.
Stop sharing. There we go. Cool. And then oh, I'm still trying to. I don't remember. Oh, more. Record. No. Still trying to get to the screen. I forgot how to get to the screen where I can see everybody.
Should be somewhere like in your top right corner. It should say view, and just make sure it's on
View. There you go. Gallery. Oh, hello. Okay. I think a few people are not on video. Most people are not on video. It seems like not as many people have questions.
I got
I have
a question for you, Daniel. Or go ahead, Bill.
Okay.
So we've bought and sold a few houses over the
Okay.
years, but we haven't done it in a really long time.
Okay.
So what would you say that what would be 2 or 3 things that we might need to prepare ourselves for that's different than maybe the
Mhm.
way it used to be, so to speak, because it's been 17, 18 years
Okay.
since we have bought and sold a house. So
Yeah.
what, besides, of course, all the information out on the internet,
Yeah. Yeah.
but what would be 2 or 3 things we might want to prepare ourselves for that's different this time around?
I would prepare for pricing shock. Um, I remember when I bought my first house, my parents bought their house in '98 in the Bay Area. And they paid 1.2 million for their house. It's a 4,100 square foot, like third acre. And then when I looked for my first house for the same price, it was a 2,500 square foot house that needed renovations, um, in a similar area. And so the pricing shock is number one. Number two, I a lot of times now, because everything is so readily available on the internet, I think a lot of times 17, 18 years ago, you would meet up with your realtor on a week, like a weeknight or a weekend or what have you, and they would go and take you and use their key, kind of walk through the house, take a look at everything. And there was no kind of Zillow, Redfin, any of those. And so you would have to meet up with your realtor, and they would basically print you out a piece of paper that had a list of properties. You would look at the piece of paper and say, oh, this one's 3 bedroom, 2 bath, and this square feet, there's a few pictures. And we want to look at this one. Okay, look at this one, this one, this one, this one. And then you would meet your realtor, and they would drive you to these places, and then you can look at the newspaper or something like that to find the the open houses and whatnot. And then so the realtor was a lot more involved in locating a house nowadays, or before. Nowadays, a lot of times I had clients that just, hey, we're gonna go to this open house, this open house, this open house, and we'll let you know what we think. And basically, they would go look at the open house. They would come back and report to me and say, hey, we like this one and this one. Um, do you work your magic? So then I would get the disclosures part. I would explain disclosures to them. And it was more the technical side of things as opposed to the physical house. It was the paperwork. It was negotiating the offer. And so the realtor's job actually has gotten a lot easier because of that. Um, and and so a lot of times the clients can do a lot more things on their own. I think that's the main thing about what's different from before. And and so part of that, and part of that came with the decreased commissions and people able to kind of, and right now it's like you can basically come up with everything on your own. You can filter those comparables. You don't have to have your realtor pull the list off of the MLS anymore. You can pretty much figure it out, and the only things that you need to find out are things that you don't know that you don't know. For example, the specifics of stuff in the disclosures. A lot of times, you don't, if you don't know what's included in the disclosures, you aren't able to go online and look up those specific documents. Which I think will change if the industry changes to decrease the compensation for buyer's agents, or say that you don't really even need a buyer's agent. Then I think there's going to be a lot more education that comes out for the consumer to then be able to look up that's not readily available right now. Like if somebody that's never shopped for a house right now goes on Google to look up what they need to find out in order to buy a house, they wouldn't know what to even Google. And I think that will change. And I think that's mostly what's different in the last kind of 17, 18 years. And it's going to be even changing even more within the next few years. So that question will actually, a lot of realtors aren't even going to be able to answer what the changes will be, because we're just going to have to see what the evolution is in the next few years. And I'm just glad that I'm not an active realtor. I have my license active, but I'm not actively trying to represent clients. So I don't have to kind of deal with all that changes and fun stuff. I hope that answers your question. Anybody else? I think we have like 12 minutes left.
Hey Daniel, I got a question.
Yeah.
Any advice for like buying real estate or managing real estate when you live in a different non-adjoining state?
Ooh. That one is a hit or miss. So the best thing, obviously the best thing to do is if you live in a different state than family, to invest where your family's from or where you have friends and relatives.
Yeah, that's why
But
I'm thinking like
yeah,
buy my dad, like my dad's either gonna leave me the house or like I'm thinking of buying a house near my dad
yeah.
or something like it'd be where I'm
I
originally
I've
from.
done yeah, I've done full presentations on property management for my meetup group in San Francisco. And at the very best, a property management company is going to do the bare minimum to get their fee. And at the very worst, they can really flush your property down the toilet. Um, so just to give you the whole property management, like I've just to give you an example, I have friends that have bought properties and have changed their property management company 3 times in the first year. Um, there's been property management companies that have told people I knew that they had trouble getting tenants, and then when the people my colleagues visited their properties on surprise visits, they found out that all the employees of the management company were living in the units for free and telling him that they couldn't find tenants for him. Um, and so I think that's the case because the whole property management industry is their compensation is flawed as a system because they earn 8 to 10% of the gross rents that you receive. And so I got lucky with my 28 unit building because um, I became best friends with the sellers. They're big time real estate investors. I partnered up with them on multiple deals, and they don't manage for anybody else, just their own portfolio. And since I was a partner, they managed for me. And so every time a lease was due, they raised the rent on time, on the day. Um, Rent increases were on time. Everything was on time because it was their own property management company and they were on top of it. A regular property management company, it takes a lot of work to, let's say they're managing a 20 unit building, to kind of print out 20 different letters to prepare and mail out to increase the notification of increasing rent. In order to increase rent, I don't know, by $10 or by $15, and then let's say by $20, right? And then you have 20 units. That's $400 a month that increases for their client, and the property management company is going to get 10% of that increase. So basically, they would be taking care of 20 different letters for 10% of $400, which is nothing per month. And so a lot of times you really have to be on top of them to do that because they're not getting compensated enough by industry standard to increase rents that way, even though you think that might be. And when I was at Indiana, I went to the I had a business class where they said, wouldn't it be advantageous for them to increase because it would increase their commissions or their fee? And it's just about where they spend their time. They make a lot more money going out and trying to get another client than just like if a real estate agent is trying to sell a house and you're really into negotiations, it would actually be more beneficial for the agent to just sell the house quickly, not spend all this time trying to negotiate an extra $20,000 and get the commission, and then spend that time getting the next listing to get a second commission, as opposed to being like, okay, I can get a commission on another $400,000 house, or I can spend all these days and weeks negotiating for an extra $20,000 for my client, which then I would get an extra 3% of that increase instead of 3% on the next deal. And so a lot of times the whole I think the whole thing is flawed. And so, but when you do, if you do need a property management company, you need to go interview 3 or 4 different companies, get references, and maybe even ask for, like, you say, okay, these are these. They'll say, oh, call these 3 references, and you just have to ask, hey, do you like? I want clients that aren't these 3 references that you gave me, because obviously you're going to give the 3 references that think that you are second to their mother in terms of hierarchy of design of likes. You're never going to give anybody that's less than that. So so you really have to do your due diligence, and read the contract carefully, because a lot of times property management contracts will try to get you to sign a 1-year thing, and if they somehow screw up or do something stupid, then you would have to pay them out for the entire year to get rid of them, which costs a lot of money. And other than that, yeah, the friends and family thing would be the best part. You can always, if it's a single family house, you can't really do this, but if it's an apartment building, you can always kind of give discounts to a trustworthy long-term tenant to be the property manager around the building. I noticed one of my friends actually has a Section 8 building. He doesn't pay the tenant, but he asked a mother with 3 young kids to kind of be the property manager, because she is extra vigilant, given she has concern over the safety of her kids. And so she basically watches over the property very, very closely and reports everything to him, because of her family circumstance. But yeah, that's my property management rant. And the fact that it's never going to be perfect. It can be normal at best.
Good to know, man. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. And I've given 1-hour presentations on just property management. What else can I think of? If you, one thing I can think of off the top of my head was, if you want, let's say you graduate from college, or you're looking to buy your first house, and you're either single, have a significant other, no kids, or you don't mind your family living in this kind of situation, apartment style situation, the very best thing to do if you're looking to get started is to buy a 4-unit property, because with residential homes, you're less liable. And I say that because especially areas with higher kind of protections for the minorities and disabled people, they're going to be much stricter on commercial, because you're supposed to be a sophisticated investor. There's a lot of corporations that own larger commercial properties, and so the authorities kind of come down on you harder for discrimination against either different ethnicities or religions or disabled, things like that, and they're a little bit more lenient. You shouldn't discriminate, but if you do something by accident, or answer a question by accident, you're not as liable if you are a landlord for a single family duplex, triplex, fourplex. And for that reason, and it's fourplex is residential, so a lot more protections, buyer protections. But first thing, best advice to get started is buy a fourplex. You live in one unit and you rent out the others. It will offset a lot of the bills you have, or you might even be able to live there for free. And when that's the situation for you, it's much easier to save up for a rental property if you have no living expenses than if you have, for example, over in this area, you buy an entry-level house for $2 million and your debt obligations for that house are $7, $8, $9, $10,000 a month. It's very difficult to save up for a rental property in that situation. So if you're in a position where you can buy a multi-unit and live in one of the units, I think that's the best thing to do. And then you can save up another down payment, move into another fourplex, rent out the rest of the units, and then you just do that until you have to buy a single family home for expanding family or other circumstances. When people ask me what do I recommend as the first thing to do, that would be ideal. And there was actually a situation a few years, like 10 years ago, probably still happens, but one of my friends owns different commercial properties. He got a phone call and this person just asked him question after question about his units. And then he just hung up the phone because there's a lot of these crazy, kind of disgusting, honestly, ambulance chasers that just ask you question and question, and then you accidentally answer one question wrong and they sue you for discrimination. And so it's almost like those guys that run out to those intersections after you have a car accident, passing you injury lawyer information. But they just kind of call people, and it's kind of almost next to trying to scam people on via, I don't know, gift cards or whatever. But they just kind of file lawsuits, and yeah, one of my friends just got a lawsuit actually because his website wasn't ADA compliant, and so people just go around suing small businesses because they know they can't fight, and they settle for 10 to 15 grand. They move on to the next small business, and I think it's pretty disgusting. But it's similar things happen in real estate too, with people just doing that. They'll sue, and they know that you're small and you can't drag it on, so they just keep on going over and over and get settlements for this and that, for 10, 15 grand, 20 grand, and then move on. And just, yeah, it's a story for another, but that's property management company isn't always the best, but that's one of the reasons that you need, once you go commercial, there's a need for it because they are kind of the experts in those laws. And if they do get sued, then they have their insurances and they can deal with that stuff. So that's, I guess, my additional input on the real estate.
I have a question.
I think I'm not sure. Oh, yes.
In an increasing real estate market,
Go
how
ahead.
often do you see like 1031 exchanges with the higher values?
1031 exchanges are very, 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 very common. It happens almost every time in terms of commercial real estate, or even residential commercial real estate. A few things to think about, nuances of 1031. So 1031, you do have to figure out what to do at the end because the gains accumulate. So if you make, let's say, $200,000, you 1031 into another property, you make $300,000. You 1031 to bigger, you make $500,000. At the end of that, you have a tax liability of $1 million in gains. So that's one thing to think about with 1031. Another thing to think about is when you're doing a 1031, usually people go to a bigger building, so it's not really an issue. But let's say you have a single family house you rent out and you want to move on to a fourplex. But it's in a different area, so it's a lot cheaper. You have to carry on the same amount of debt to the next deal. So for example, if you owe $600,000 on a single family house, and then you want to go to a cheaper area to get more cash flow, and the fourplex costs $600,000. You still have to get $600,000 worth of debt onto the next deal. Or if you want to decrease the debt, you have to put in cash. So for example, if you owe $500,000 on a deal, your next mortgage is going to be $400,000. You actually have to come out of pocket $100,000 to bridge the decrease in the debt that you bring over, which is normally not an issue for people because most of the time people are going to go a lot bigger on the next deal, and that's the reason they sell, is to kind of scale and bring their portfolios up. But I actually almost made that mistake until somebody that knew more about it than me at the time told me. So those are a couple of things that I can think of off the top of my head. But 1031s are very, very, very popular. And if you do one, I would suggest going through a third party. So what they do is they would, so the rules of the 1031, you have to identify properties within, I think it was like 45 days, and then you have to close on a property within 120 days or something like that. And so what they do is the escrow would wire your funds after you sell your property directly to the 1031 exchange company, so you never touch it. And so you have a paper trail of the money not coming back to you. And then they would actually give you a form, and you write down properties that you identify. And you would turn it into them before the 120 days. They sign off on it saying, okay, this guy or gal identified the properties in the appropriate amount of days to qualify for the 1031. And then they do all the paperwork for you. And then when you buy the next property, they would then wire the money to escrow to buy the next property. So they hold on to the money. They take care of everything for tax purposes. And I think they charged me like $800 or something like that. It was something pretty negligible. And so something like that, to not worry about getting your paperwork or anything correct, I think is worth it for less than $1,000. But 1031 is very, very popular. I think 99.99% of people that are in real estate do a 1031, depending on your circumstance. If you do enough active business to kind of, I have partners that are constantly buying and selling, and so they have bonus depreciation and a lot of things that can wipe out that income on taxes. Then they don't do it, but majority of people do 1031s.
Yeah, I see it quite often as well. I'm a CPA, tax professional in the real estate industry.
Oh, okay.
Northern Nevada, I see quite a lot of clients that come to me.
Okay, so you probably know better than I do what I just told you.
Yeah. I was just curious about your experience. How does it really invest for you?
Yeah, I actually took advantage of the 2022 stock market crash. I sold off everything, waited 30 days, and then bought back, captured that loss that I can use to offset the gain on my apartment building, the capital losses. And so I personally didn't do a 1031 for this building, but that was kind of like, it's not too often that you get that kind of I got that opportunity, so I took that opportunity to exit my 1031 accumulation train.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Yeah. I can't think about anything else. Anything else other than basics. But for commercial, I think the number one thing is just cap rates. That's the number one thing that people should should know and study if they wanted to invest in real estate. Because just give I think we have a couple minutes left. I'll just give a quick example. When my partners that sold me the 28 unit building, so I found out that there used to be a pool in the courtyard of that 28 unit building. So what they did was they filled in the pool. They went to insurance. They said, hey, we don't have a pool here anymore. There's no liability for that. Can you kind of reanalyze, for my lack of knowledge of the correct term, our insurance premium? So they came back and they said, hey, yeah, your insurance premium decreased because you got rid of your pool. That increased the net operating income of the property, and that actually increased the value of the property. I think they made like $150,000 or $200,000 just by filling in the pool from the insurance premiums going down, and you dividing that increase in net income by the cap rate, which at the time was like 9%. So they divide, when you divide by a decimal, you get a much bigger number for the gain. So so things like that, creative things like that you can do with commercial property, whereas residential property, you just have to wait till the houses around you go up. When the comps go up, then your investment goes up, and that's all you can really do. If people look at your house that's fully remodeled versus another house that's not as remodeled but still looks decent, they're more likely to put an offer on yours, but it's not going to command an offer that's significantly higher just because it's remodeled. Unlike in a commercial property, you can raise the rents, and that would increase the value tremendously. So that's just off the top of my head blurb about why I like the commercial again. But I think we're out of time. So
Yeah, you took us to the full hour, man. Thank you so much for your for everything.
Yeah, I just had to just
Yeah.
and
And if anyone wants
good.
Daniel's info, definitely willing to pass that along. And of course, the session's recorded and it's very knowledgeable. So thanks again for
Yeah,
doing
and then
it.
I sent you the slides. I sent Vito the slides. But I mean, the only thing I changed was like 1 or 2 typos. So I changed that this morning. I